Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Mike DeLillo. I'm the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Cultural Affairs. I want to welcome all of you to the 44th Annual Heritage Preservation Award Ceremony. Happy Heritage Preservation Month. It's a beautiful May day. It is Friday the 13th, but an event as important as this, the State Cultural Properties Review Committee rewarded outstanding preservation accomplishments statewide. Certainly defies superstition and any notions of method. We're off to a good start. Before going any further, I'd like to thank Rob Martinez. His day job is the Assistant State Historian. He works with CPRC Chairman Rick Hendricks, the New Mexico State Historian. But in his off hours, as you can see, he plays guitar and sings in the duo Lennon McCarthy. Rob is part of a musical family from northern New Mexico. They have performed at the Kennedy Center, the Smithsonian, and at venues throughout the entire state of New Mexico. Rob, thank you very much. Again, this is a landmark year in historic preservation. 2016 is the centennial of the National Park Service and the 50th anniversary of the National Historic Preservation Act. The Act made it possible for every state to have a preservation office that works with the Park Service to further historic preservation in all 50 states and U.S. territories. In New Mexico, we call it fondly the Historic Preservation Division. The Cultural Properties Review Committee lists historic buildings and cultural sites in the State Register of Cultural Properties and recommends them for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places. They approve historic markers, archaeological permits, and tax credits that have generated millions of dollars invested in historic buildings in New Mexico over the last 3 decades. The committee also approves the awards about to be presented today. These awards are official recognition by the state of New Mexico of the hard work it takes to preserve our heritage in every part of this state. Historic preservation is one of the foundations upon which New Mexico's cultural economy is built. A recent study that the Department of Cultural Affairs conducted revealed that cultural activities pump about $5.6 billion into our economy, that the cultural industries provide about 1 in every 10 jobs in New Mexico, and that cultural heritage activities account for 25% of tourism in our state. Historic preservation happens locally, and these awards are official state recognition of your very, very hard work. In conclusion, I'd like to acknowledge the contributions of HPE and the CPRC to the ceremony. Together, they identify and protect our cultural heritage, and without that process, much of our cultural heritage would indeed be lost. Jeff Pappas is the division director. He's the State Historic Preservation Officer, and he's also kind enough to serve as the interim director of our Historic Sites Division. The department is extremely grateful that we have Dr. Pappas on board, so let me introduce him at this time. Jeff.
Well, welcome everyone, and thanks, Mike. We appreciate it. I'll stay with you. I always love you in a few moments. This year is an important year, mark the year 2016. I can't think of a more important date to celebrate the astonishing achievements in historic preservation. This year marks 3 significant anniversaries, as Mike had said, that have had a profound impact on the work that we all do. Number 1, the 100th anniversary of the founding of the National Park Service in 1916. Number 2, the 50th anniversary of the National Historic Preservation Act. And 3, though somewhat lesser, though less important, is the 50th anniversary of the end of the Mission 66 era, which I'll explain in a little more detail in my opening remarks. Before I do that, I would like to recognize some very special people that are here with us. Senator Peter Ward is here with us. Former CPRC Chairman Matt Watson, HEP alum Bill Young, Councilor Signa Lindell or Javier Gonzalez. I also want to mention our poster sponsors as well. They include Matt Bandy of the CPRC, whose SWCA environmental consultants made a very generous corporate level contribution to give to the poster fund. Matt is also, as I mentioned, on the CPRC. Dorothy Victor, I believe, is here as well. Dorothy was a longtime member of our staff here at HPD. Thanks, Tom. And served as acting co-director and has memorialized her parents on the poster for many, many years. Our own Tom Drake, we should remember his mom. Former SHPO Tom Merlin is also a sponsor, as well as Sal Martino, who has sponsored the poster also for many years. All of them are with us today. And last, to the New Mexico Heritage Preservation Alliance and to their board, who every year works very closely with Tom and HPD to make this event a success. And last but not least, Eric Lindman, Division Director in the Office of Archaeological Sites here in Santa Fe, is very much involved in making our poster awesome. So would all of you please stand and be acknowledged, the ones that I've mentioned, and please let's give them a hand for supporting this and so many other activities. Thank you all. And of course, all the work that we do here, the Historic Preservation Division, couldn't be possible without an excellent staff. And they're all here today, so the members of the HPD staff, please stand and be recognized. I'll get the most of you back here. Now, I will say a little bit more about the poster and some of those that were responsible for its design toward the end of my remarks. But continuing with our good cheer today, I'd like to recognize the astonishing diversity and quality of this year's awardees. It goes to show just how remarkable a place New Mexico is and the people who made it so. And like I said, this year is particularly significant in the short history of our profession. True, efforts to save important places like Mount Vernon and other sites associated with Washington and the founding fathers took place well over 160 years ago. But the historic preservation movement, as we know it today, really began just 50 short years ago. 1966 with the passage of the National Historic Preservation Act by President Lyndon Johnson. There was the NHPA that established the state historic preservation offices throughout the United States, also in the islands of Guam and Puerto Rico. And from there, an entire movement actively began to change the way we think about and do history. And the evidence could be more apparent right here in New Mexico. The standards set in the NHPA expanded the perceived understanding as to what should and should not be thought of as historical. Rather than the iconic Victorian homes and other turn-of-the-century treasures represented in places like Charleston and Savannah, Georgia, and to an extent here in Santa Fe. More non-traditional places like New Mexico's unique and vast vernacular gems, once considered outside elite classification, were now brought in and evaluated for their own merit. It was a revolutionary change in thinking, and today we celebrate 50 years of preservation work based on far more egalitarian principles. Because of NHPA, New Mexico SHPO, starting in the late 1960s and into the 1970s with longtime SHPO Tom Merlin, has generated well over 2,000 state and national register nominations, representing a diverse grouping of buildings, structures, and archaeological sites throughout the state. Now, equally important to this movement, in 2016 is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the National Park Service, now the custodian of 411 units nationwide. Back in 1911, key people from various industries and the public got together at the first superintendent's conference in Yellowstone. It began a dialogue to establish a unified system to manage the parks. The few that had been established up to them were shared amongst several federal agencies. Bringing the parks together under one roof, managed by a single director, seemed like a good thing to do. especially after the 1906 Antiquities Act, which brought in so many new parks into the system, including many parks here in New Mexico. And now the collective natural and cultural assets housed within our national park system constitutes the largest educational facility in the world. Over its relatively short history, the National Park Service has taken on some rather significant responsibilities when it comes to historic preservation. And they're the ones, of course, that write our standards today. Now, if you take a close look at our 2016 Heritage Preservation Month post, if you've had an opportunity, and for those of you that received it in the mail, you'll notice a third, though lesser commemoration that we noted on the poster, and that is the 50th anniversary of the end of the Mission 66 program. Yet another NPS initiative started in 1956 by President Eisenhower that brought needed capital improvements to the parks following World War II. The program lasted roughly 10 years, ending in 1966, thus the Mission 66 name. In fact, the last National Park unit built under the Mission 66 program was the expansion arch in St. Louis. More interestingly, the Mission 66 program, in clear defiance of the NPS tradition to rustic architecture, brought to the parks a more modern look, or what became known as Park Service Modern, captured brilliantly in Martin Stupich's superb photo. And Martin actually is here today. Martin, can you stand? And I was told to say this, expertly designed by HPD's Tom Drake. The image perfectly captures the architecture of Mission 66 and how the program's visitor centers took advantage of their proximity to critical cultural resources such as the Quested and the Inscription Rock at El Morro. The National Park Service built roughly 115 visitor centers between 1956 and 1966, in addition to countless residential and other types of properties in the mid-century modern tradition, which fundamentally changed the face and function of the National Park Service. So now we celebrate these anniversaries and begin the critical work of evaluating them as the next generation of historic resources in New Mexico. As I mentioned earlier, of course, the work that we do here cannot be done without a committed staff, and we have a great one. And with that, Harry Grant, you guys recognize that? That's the Mount Rushmore VC that was torn down for the new one, but classic image of people who were saying Harry Grant. Thank you for that, guys. And of course, we do have a great staff that actually put together this PowerPoint presentation. Former HPD Nicole Ramirez-Thomas up the back. And with that is the commitment of the Cultural Properties Review Committee and its chair, Dr. Rick Hendricks, of whom this ceremony is named for. But the foundation of our work and its continued success is also attributed to the sustained support of the Department of Cultural Affairs and its Secretary, Veronica Gonzalez, who couldn't be with us today. But in her place, though, as Master of Ceremonies is going to be Secretary Michael DeLelli, whom, like Veronica, has taken a keen interest in the HPD. So to Veronica and Mike, thank you for all that you do. Now, to end my little segment here, I'd like to introduce the custodian here, Dan Eyring, who's also the president of the Scottish Rite Building Association. And I want to say just a couple of words about the relationship that we've had with Scottish Rite over the years. We primarily have housed our award ceremony here in this wonderful facility, and we'll continue that tradition as long as you will have us. So Dan, if you'd like to say a few words, please come on up. And thank you and enjoy the event.
Thank you very much. I want to welcome you all to our Scottish Rite Center. Let you know that we, the members of the Scottish Rite, have taken on the challenge to maintain this building for our use and for public use, from now and into the future. I want to let you know that. In support of that, we are working on some projects to make it more accessible for people with disabilities. We have some projects, one of which is an elevator to carry you from this level to all levels above. One is an access point into the building from the ground level, so you don't have to negotiate all these stairs around here. And third, we have some handicap restrooms in the design phase. So if you have any interest in helping us with the design concepts or even implementation fundraising, we would appreciate it. Thank you once again for being here.
Okay, next on our agenda, I'd like to just briefly introduce the Deputy State Historic Preservation Office and State Archaeologist, Jan Yell. Of course, Jan's been with the division for roughly, I think it's 18 years now. So, Jan?
About the Cultural Properties Review Committee, also known as the CPRC. The committee was established in 1969, and in 3 short years, they too will celebrate their 50th anniversary. It is both a professional board and a citizens board of 9 members that include 1 statutory member, the state historian, and the remaining members appointed by the governor. 6 members are individuals with demonstrated expertise in 1 or more of the historic preservation specialties, including the fields of architectural history, architecture, prehistoric archaeology, and historic archaeology. There is 1 person who is a member of the New Mexico Indian Nation, tribe, or pueblo, and 1 resident of New Mexico who represents the general public. The CPRC is a hard-working board. It reads hundreds and hundreds of pages of material over the year. In addition, it sets policy and advises the State Historic Preservation Officer and the staff at HPD. It encourages and promotes public knowledge and appreciation of New Mexico's historic and cultural heritage. It works with federal, state, local and private agencies and individuals who are engaged in historic preservation work throughout the state. The Cultural Properties Review Committee also determines what constitutes historical, archaeological, scientific, architectural, or other cultural significance. It determines what cultural properties are worthy of preservation. It reviews national and state register nominations. It reviews income tax credit projects for the rehabilitation of historic buildings and structures, as Mike mentioned a little earlier in his remarks. It reviews permits for archaeological studies on state land. And you might not know that they approve the text for the official scenic historic markers that you see throughout the state, so that you can stop by and actually stand by a place of historic importance, among many other responsibilities. And the CPRC has the privilege to recognize outstanding historic preservation projects and the work of individuals and organizations in its annual awards ceremony, the reason we are here today. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Rick Hendricks, the chairman of the Cultural Properties Review Committee, to start today's awards ceremony.
Thanks to all of you for coming. I know some of you traveled from long distances and made special arrangements to be here, and we really appreciate you taking the effort. On behalf of the committee, I'd like to express our appreciation and welcome you, offer the committee's welcome to you for the 44th Annual Heritage Preservation Award Ceremony. I'd like for us to take a minute to remember Jenny Vincent, who this past Mother's Day passed away. For those of you who don't know, I imagine most of you do, Jenny Vincent was a dyed-in-the-wool liberal activist. She was particularly active in preserving Hispanic folk tunes and the right to use Spanish language in the classroom. She lived 103 years, which meant she had the opportunity to perform with Paul Robeson. And then a decade ago, 2006, she won the first Lifetime Achievement Award, and not only did she win the award that day, she performed. I suppose you could say this ceremony constitutes an official meeting of the CPRC. We have a quorum. We have an agenda. It's been a minute every day this week, but we do have an agenda. We have a program, and this is the one meeting that all of us on the committee really never want to miss. our opportunity to recognize the grassroots work that goes into preserving New Mexico's cultural heritage. Today we're going to recognize scholars, writers, photographers, people, and organizations who helped establish the historic district, and those who saved and preserved buildings of great significance to their communities. There are individuals who have retired from careers in archaeology and architecture, an organization that was the driving force behind one of the first local preservation ordinances in the state. There are 14 awards this year, and the 20 individuals receiving them will be asked to the stage to accept them. Your reactions and comments are the most important part of the ceremony, but we do request some brevity to give everyone a fair chance to speak. Before we get to our first awards for individual achievement, I'd like to introduce the Cultural Properties Review Committee. These are my colleagues in preserving New Mexico heritage, and I'll ask each of you to stand as I call your name. Reginald Ritchie, an architect and vice chair. Christopher Purvis, an architect, represents the disciplines of history and architecture on the committee. Ron Toy is the committee's tribal representative. Douglas Bogus is a historic archaeologist. And Dr. Matthew Bandy is a member specializing in prehistoric archaeology.